Reverend Dr. Cedric Von East. That's a heavy name for thank him for his kind invitation to all clergy who are present, to the deacon board, to the deaconess, to the trustees. I'm AAUs, I go through this stuff all the time. But you know that members and friends, and God's sons of sword and salvation, God's daughters of dust and deliverance. I'm grateful to be here for this preparatory period for your 91st anniversary. We understand that during the anniversaries we reflect on things that have happened before. Sankofa means we learn from our past so we can go forward. And sometimes anniversary means that we may spend too long on the past and forget about the future. So let us go to the Word this morning from Deuteronomy, the 1st chapter, verses 6, 7, and 8 from the Common English Bible. Deuteronomy 1, 6 through 8 from the Common English Bible. At Horeb, the Lord our God told us, "You've been at this mountain long enough. Get going into the hills of the Amorites and surrounding areas in the desert, the highlands and the lowlands and the arid southern region and the seacoast, the land of the Canaanites and the Lebanon range, all the way to the great Euphrates River. Look, I have laid the land before you. Go and possess the land that I promised to give your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as well as to their descendants after them." The topic the Lord would have us attend to this morning is just keep moving. Just keep moving. To move means to go past to another place in a certain direction with a continuous motion. Walking, as Mary would say, "Tell me what you see when I pass by, a shadow, a cloud, a line in the sky. Am I getting it wrong or am I getting it right? All I can take is one step at a time." To move means to change direction, one's residence or location, like the 1970 sitcom characters Wheezy and George. Well, we're moving on up to the east side, to a deluxe apartment in the sky. We're moving on up to the east side. We finally got a piece of the pie. To move means to dislodge, to displace from a fixed position, a drastic change or action, way of thinking, or over one system or another, like Randy Crawford, who once wrote, "Everything must change. Nothing stays the same. Everyone will change nothing, and no one goes unchanged." To move spiritually means to change one's reservation in eternity. It's a progressive movement, a renunciation of what was in favor of what is. To modify one's behavior to come in line with God's plan. The gospel writer of my youth once wrote, "I moved from my old house, and I moved from my old friends, I moved from my old way of life. Thank God I moved on to a brand new life." As we mature, as our bodies begin to age, medical professionals and health clubs emphasize the essential nature of exercise, effort, keeping fit, training, and movement. The mothers and fathers used to say, you either use it or you're going to lose it. There are benefits of movement. Your brain stays healthy. You have some flexibility. Your creativity increases and enhances your mental and emotional and spiritual well-being. It lowers your risk of dying. I'm on assignment to share with you that from the time God spoke us into being and the Spirit moved across the face of chaotic waters, God breathed life-sustaining breath into humankind from dirt and spit. The world has kept on moving and active and changing, evolving according to God's plan, teeming with life. When it appeared that we had stalled and stopped and got stagnated on what we used to be and not what God wants us to be. According to the biblical text, God's world will continue to move on with or without us, so we might as well keep moving. In the 5th book of the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, we find a 120-year-old Moses, 40 years after the exile, still leading the children of Israel. In the text, Moses is in the last weeks of his life. He's been with them through a season of making bricks without straw in Egyptian bondage under a new king that didn't know Joseph or how they got to the land of Goshen. He's been with them through plagues of bloody water and frogs and lice and flies and urine on livestock and boils and hail and locusts and darkness and even infant death. He has led 600,000 men plus women and children. There are actually 3.5 million because brothers married 4 people then. I'm so glad you got 6 now. There was that miraculous parting of the Red Sea that Yom shook by God's direction of a strong east wind. They had clothes that always fit and shoes that didn't wear out. Their protective clouds by day and illuminating fire by night. They traveled in the wilderness of sin, fed by quails that were showered on them, manna from heaven, water out of rocks. There was that mountaintop vision of God written when he wrote with his finger on tablets of stone. There was that rebellious party at the foot of the mountain, when they honored the golden calf. Some of us are still honoring golden calves today. Attacks by internal and external enemies. Many who initially followed Moses preferred enslavement to freedom. God, and he witnessed God's punishment of an entire generation for their disbelief of God's promise of a land of milk and honey. They did not see the promised land, only their desert surroundings. They forfeited their inheritance for a transient high. They died in the wilderness. Self-destructive behaviors became the order of the day for many of them. Some decided the cost of change was just too high. Some opted for token promotion while others remained locked out of leadership. Some encountered disappointment that human promises became counterfeit checks and no denominational bank could even cash. Some got so caught up with but I can't and they won't let me theology they couldn't focus on God's possibilities and promise. Some began to slide into zombie-like trances, allowing cankerous leadership to grow like unchecked spiritual cancer. Some became complicitous in their own self-deception as long so long that the truth was a vague memory. Some of them perpetuating self-entitlement to wealth while others languished in poverty. Some continued to voice opinion in private telephone conversation, emails and texts during the worship service and chat rooms, and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, conference calls and sidewalk sidebars, parking lot patter and restaurant rhetoric in the meeting after the meeting at the door of the temple because they were too afraid to speak up inside. But we've always done it this way became the mantra of those that were afraid to change, were too lazy to get up off their seats and do nothingness and try something new. In the text, Moses is leading the 60 and under crowd who faithfully followed him out of Egypt, and some had been born in the wilderness, who would soon be following Joshua in quest for the promised land. To help him bear the burdens of leadership, God appointed 70 leaders, elders, and judges to help him. And now, standing on one side of the Jordan, they could see the land that God had promised their ancestors, that they hadn't occupied for over 400 years. And even after experiencing God's saving power in the wilderness, the deliverance and the salvation of God, the children of Israel were camped on the edge of enlightenment, on the periphery of proof, on the rim of reward, on the border of blessing, on the fringe of finish, on the lip of liminality. They were in residence on the plain of Moab, among poisonous snakes of fear and scorpions of immobility and their unwillingness to change their location, homelessly living in the past, passively dreaming of a time of reward, existing in a wasteland of rock and sand. They were becoming restless and second-guessing God. Maybe they had just paid attention to the wrong report. CNN had too many commentators that didn't have a clue what they were talking about. Fox was permanently entranced in some red-tinged outlook online. PBS was having another pledge drive and couldn't be bothered with the faith journey. MSNBC was giving intellectual critiques of the position. C-SPAN kept repeating over and over and over and over and over again Moses and Pharaoh's great speeches of the past. BBC had accurate information but didn't know the culture. The wilderness dwellers were so caught up in who they used to be, they couldn't fathom what God wanted them to be for the next 91 years. There they stood and they could almost see. They could almost taste liberation. They could almost smell independence. They could almost touch self-determination on the other side of through, but they start moving, became camped out in the valley of almost. Have you ever been moving along and without warning couldn't go, as my elders used to say, another further? They could envision deliverance, but they found themselves with doubt seeping into their conversations, and disappointment becoming their pillows, and desperation replacing their bedding, and disbelief deflating their dreams. They seemingly had forgot what they had heard about Moses' mountaintop experience. They began to murmur. And nothing worse than black people murmur. I was here when they got here. I don't know where the money's coming from. I don't know why they keep asking us to be stuff and take all that kind of stuff up there. They all got someplace else to be. Don't they never mind? All these new people coming up in here. We was here when they made the no ownership of what to do next, no incentive to change their position, no attempt to move closer, just inching along like the poor inchworm. Perhaps they thought the water was too deep, transition too hard, so they remained in complacency camp, in going along to get along alliances and have my gift groups and whine a lot alcoves, stagnated by sleep, immobilized by information, riveted by rebuttal, calcified by cautiousness in the text. Moses begins his last sermon series by reminding the people of God's plan and their responsibility to actualize the gifts, the plans that God had made for their ancestors, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Rachel and Leah, because brother couldn't make up his mind. God instructed Moses to start speaking to the people. So Moses takes texts from the second law, originally given to their parents and grandparents at the foot of Mount Sinai. He knew it was up to the current people, the current generation, to follow the law and choose life or choose death like the last generation. He understood that tomorrow is not promised. We can only do what we can do today. And perhaps he began to extort them so they would remember their history and all the ways God had made them. But the crux of his sermon tells the children of Israel and God's children today, you have been around this mountain long enough. You've been around this long enough. It's time to wake up and put some feet on your dreams and move out of the comfort zone and forget what was behind and start reaching for what's ahead. French philosopher Albert Camus once said, change is the struggle to death between the future and the past. The reason many of us don't move and change and transform anything, anybody, is because we're scared to work up a sweat for God. We have tried to remember tripping and aiming on the bracket, that bless me, give me my own stuff. Everybody else can go straight to hell. No advancement unless some self-proclaimed prophet tells us what to do. Our future remains stagnant and stifled and stuck on stupid. But God has promised us a future filled with hope. Not harm, but good. God's voice in the text proclaims it's time to move on to what will be. Yesterday was fine. Learn from yesterday, but it's time to move on to what will be. The sounds of salvation are dynamic. They're not stagnant. We have to listen to the voice of God saying, today is the day. You have stayed in that place long enough. It is time to get up and move away from all those things that kept you where you were. The amalgamation of despair, the heap of alienation, the stack of shame, the world of guilt, the abundance of oppression, the confusion of have to be in control, the mess of never ever wrong, the mass of holding a grudge, the amount of I'm the only one that cares, the cuteness of failure to care for my own temple, the barrel of afraid to confront any political realities long enough. Santiago once said, I quote, those who don't remember their past are doomed to repeat it. Listen to God's message. I have given you the land. The promise of God is a gift. Open it. Stop. When I was growing up, my aunt had this wonderful French provincial furniture that she had laid away, but she was paying money on it, But it had plastic over it. And in the summertime, your behind would stick to the glass. But plastic over it. And what they didn't understand is that the plastic and the heat, there's a chemical that's released that starts destroying the fabric that's underneath it. That's what we're doing to our blessings. us. Some of us keep the plastic over our blessing because we want to show everybody when they come to visit what our blessings are, but it's destroying itself because we open it up. The promise is a gift from God. Open it up. God is commissioning them to stop waiting. Stop waiting for somebody else to free them. Stop waiting for something to happen. Waiting for somebody else to make them happy. Waiting for the knight in shining armor. Waiting for the next celebrity look-alike spouse. Check yourself in the mirror while you're waiting. Waiting for the next talk show singer. Waiting for the new media-defined leader. Waiting for the next mega conference to waste all your money with some God told you last year anyhow. Waiting to be rescued from a gladiator in a suit. It's time to step out of the shadows and do what seems impossible. Don't we know that God will call people that nobody else expects to do something, to do extraordinary things? Desert in the years of Moses, discovering about his inadequacies. Boarding school Samuel was hearing sounds of the night. Sheep watching David was dealing with his personal issues. Whining Elijah was promoting his solitary ministry. Agricultural special Elisha was plowing his own fields. Temple worshiping Isaiah was mourning the death of a king. Womb called Jeremiah was fearful of public speaking. Privileged second wife Esther was avoiding her responsibility. Whale dwelling Jonah was a defiant racist. 5 times divorced woman at the well was seeking respectable long-term relationship. Sea salt smelling Peter was seeking to broaden his landfall fishing abilities. Wounded women Mary Magdalene was seeking freedom from social and psychological and spiritual intellectual discrimination. Gamaliel School of Theology, D-men, don't you see? In killing whoever doesn't agree with us, Saul was blinded by the weight of his own wrong thinking. Long-time poolside beggar kept waiting for somebody else to put him in the water instead of getting up and getting there himself. Lifelong, beautiful gate, waiting, no contribution to society. Man was begging for a handout every day. Every one of us has an excuse sometimes for not getting up and moving when God says move. But look at God's directions throughout the biblical text. God's saying that we're not sponges. It's time for us to move when God says move. God says, I will require you to do things that nobody else even thinks about doing. I'm going to ask you to board some boats during storms with a whole bunch of smelly animals. I'm going to ask you to go into a fiery furnace without any protective gear on. I'm going to ask you to fight giants with a slingshot and a couple of rocks. I'm going to ask you to eat takeout out in a cave that birds are going to come and serve. I'm going to ask you to go to sleep with lions all around you. I'm going to ask you to share your last frame of food with a stranger. I'm going to ask you to put half of your color designer label so somebody else is not thinking. I'm going to ask you to pray to somebody who can't. Now is the time to act, to move, to break camp, to discard anything that's holding us back from being who God wants us to be. God says you've been around this mountain long enough. You've been sitting in that place much too long. God says right now I want you to just listen to my instructions and do what I tell you to do. God says get up and get moving. Pack your bags and travel light. Put a for sale sign out in front of your stuff. Store your memories on your SD card. Turn off the utilities. Give away whatever you don't need. Have your mail forwarded. Let nothing and nobody turn you around. Turn off the GPS. I already gave you instructions to the home manifest. What are you waiting for? God says, come on, my children. It's time for you to get up and get ready. This is not an after while, by and by, milk and honey kind of thing. I need you to get up and get to work today. If we don't move, we become tepid and apathetic and inert and somnolent and comatose, paralyzed by putting things off, inert by making excuses, impaled on what coulda, shoulda, woulda been, going around in circles, blaming everybody else for our own mess, transferring ourselves on people we don't even know, content on being Sunday morning season retirement. My family built this church, crisis-oriented, begging, blessing, smooth sailing, long as ain't nobody looking, but things go my way. If they sing my song out of the mouth of that preacher, depending on the hope of my life, it's all about me. I get unless somebody calls you, then I run this. You better dance to what I say. I was this close to the ring. I can almost dance it almost with the people with atrophy muscles. Dreams becoming non-existent, outreach being stingy, community involvement being apathetic. Our faith becomes stagnant and stinks up the nostrils of God. We've been blessings for too long. Blaming somebody else for too long. Afraid to dispose of our own toxic assets for too long. God says enough is enough. Maybe next year, too long. When I get myself together, too long. If they would just, too long. Ain't nobody asking you, too long. Mired in hopelessness, too long. Waiting, making excuses for why we can't inhabit the land. Putting your trust in a human being and forgetting about God for too long. But I'm scared, too long. I can't, too long. Don't have enough money, too long. Can't pass the test. If you study, you might pass something. Too long. Everybody hates you. Too long. They don't like you. Too long. Nobody's gonna come. Too long. What difference can I make? Too long. I'm already tired. Too long. Everybody talking about me. Too long. Too long. Too long. Too long. God said, look, I've already given you all the tools you need to do the work. If you just look back over your life and think things over instead of just singing this song, you know you've already done more than God has you to do right now, today. If you don't get up and get moving when God says move, darkness will not get out of light's way, and weeping won't move out of joy's present, and lost will not be found, and the blind won't see, and the deaf won't hear, and the disabled will never walk, and the voices will never speak, and the sick won't get well, and the enslaved won't go free, and wars won't cease, and governments won't have integrity, and nations won't be united, unemployed won't have jobs, the children won't be safe, youth won't be educated, the elders won't be respected, the heritage will not be remembered, prayers will not have purpose, songs will not be composed, sermons won't be preached, minds won't be expanded, houses will not be built, churches will not be filled, love will not be expressed, peace will not be attainable, dreams will not be actualized, lives will not be changed, believers will not see God's face, the faithful will not see the reward, and heaven will not be our home. Us to hear our prayers when we call. In the wilderness, on rugged terrain, in hard places, in desolate surroundings, in churches, in schools, on jobs, in the belly of the whale, in the claws of those that seek to kill and destroy us, on the tongues of those that lie about us, in the stares of the people that want to replace us, in the pen of those that want to write us out of history, in the words of cyberspace that continue to dehumanize us, like the children of Israel. Some of us are going to die on the way. Some of us are going to want to turn back because it looks like it's too hard. Some of us are going to suffer, but some of us will be able to say, and are we yet alive to see each other's face? God can move all earthly barriers. God's grace is truly sufficient for anything God wants us to do. Can't you see that God has promised to restore whatever we have lost, to make all the uneven ground level? The first and last are going to be receiving the same pay. Men and women are going to be equally valued. Skin color can be transparent. Young and elders' wisdom will be respected. The rough places can be made smooth. Trouble won't last always. God never fails to send the rain of renewal and a hedge of protection on those that are following what God tells us to do. Get up off your seat of do nothingness and keep moving. Remember the one that covers Israel, never slumbers or sleeps. We've been around this mountain long enough. God kept us when we couldn't keep ourselves.
That's right.
God provided us for everyone. Everybody in our family said no one would help us. God stood with us when our friends walked away from us. God interceded on our behalf when everybody else was ashamed of us. Keep moving. It's time, my brothers and sisters, to do what God says, to move, maneuver, renew, shift, and transfer, to alter our positions, to dislocate, to disturb, to shake and shift. Shake out those muscles that are so tight. Get all the kinks out of your body so you can do what God says do. It's time to budge and stir and move and act and inspire and stimulate and work. Keep on doing. It's time to drive and mobilize and propel, to keep, to impress. Keep on moving. Get up off your couches. Roll off your bed and being too tired. Clear off the desk and letting everybody else do it. Stop listening to what they said. Request some spiritual corrective lenses so you can see God in each other. Quit begging for stuff God already said that God gave you. Do something for Christ other than whine all the time. If we're ready to vacate the premises and move, God will give us what we do. It's time to wake up, get up, move out, and do. God said, I promise I've made a way out of no way. I've already fought your battles for you. I open doors that nobody can shut. I shut the doors that nobody can open. I set a table for you. Come on up here and me. It's time to change position. It's time to move, to serve a God of action and not reaction. regenerate our communities and stop complaining about what Washington ain't doing. Washington don't live where you live. Clean up your own place. Time to have a mind to work together to reconstruct our institutions of faith, to educate somebody else, to liberate somebody else, to quench the thirst of somebody else. Keep moving. We've been around this mountain long enough. I don't know about you, but I'm still glad God is speaking life into what we think are dead situations. God is still freeing us from the slavery of sin and the sin of slavery. God understood that even in 2013, black people that should know that God can free us up from all of our stuff, who have started living into the culture instead of understanding we live into what Christ wants us to do. God knew that even in 2013, somebody was going to be sitting still too long. That's why over 2,000 years ago, there was a meeting up in heaven one day. Jesus, who was there in the beginning and moved across the face of the chaotic water. Jesus, the prophet of Isaiah, called Wonderful Counselor, Prince of Peace. Jesus modeled how little becomes much when we get up and do what we're supposed to do. That's why Jesus took one historical conversation over 42 generations. One angelic announcement. One undercover assignment in the womb of a 14-year-old virgin. Jesus took one no vacancy sign at a local motel. Jesus took one manger and one night heaven and earth just couldn't quit singing. One trip to Egypt to avoid death. One 12-year-old trial sermon. 30 years of carpentry and feeding and listening and developing writing. He took one celebration that affected water that he converted to life and from him. He took 30 recorded miracles and 3 years of healing and teaching and preaching. 3 recorded resurrections of believers. 1 calming of a raging sea. 1 feeding of 5,000 at outdoor revival one day and turned around and fed 4,000 next because black people got to see things twice before they understand it. 1 healing of transferred figured saints. 1 blessing of children. 1 parade toward destiny. 1 cursing of unprotected character. Jesus took 1 parting jack over Jerusalem. 1 carrying out of the temple and 1 last meal with his friend. Jesus took 1 $10 betrayer and 1 garden prayer meeting and 3 sleeping watchmen. Jesus took 1 losing plea bargain with his family, his father, and 1 SWAT team arrest. Jesus took 1 false charge and 3 kangaroo courts, 1 public hand washing, 1 parole of a convicted killer, 1 long death row march with a Via Dolorosa, 1 public stripping, 39 lashes, 72 thorns, 1 cross, 3 nails, 1 pierced side, 1 garden ring. Jesus took 6 execution hours, 1 broken heart, 1 world of sin, 1 suicide of a traitor, 10 friendly deserts, 1 casino at the foot of the cross, 2 thieves, Dismas on one side, guesses on the other, a sacrifice for the whole world, 1 empty tomb, 1 evangelist, 1 resurrection, 1 dispatch of the comforter, 1 promise of return so you can get up and keep on moving.